Hello and welcome. Well, normally I would say welcome to another episode of the Dugout Podcast. However, though, this is not an official show. As you can see, it's just me. But hi there, I'm Andrew from the Dugout Podcast, and this evening I'm just gonna give you my thoughts, share my views on what has transpired of late at Liverpool Football Club, chiefly surrounding Mohammad Salah and Arne Slot. Now, as I believe the entire football community already knows, Mohammad Salah came out and gave a stinging interview post match after the 3-3 draw with Leeds United in the Premier League on Saturday. Subsequently, he was left out of Liverpool squad that travelled to Italy to take on Inter Milan in Champions League, and ultimately came away with a 1-0 victory. But unfortunately, we at the Devout Podcast, we weren't able to have a proper show this week. But just to keep the content flowing, and obviously we don't want this topic to get any colder. I felt it was imperative that I come on here and share my thoughts on all things Mohammad Salah. Now, let me preface what I'm about to say by saying that Mohammad Salah has been one of my favorite players to ever represent Liverpool. He is one of Liverpool's best ever players in the history of the club, especially in my lifetime, obviously. Probably the greatest player, aside from one Steven Gerrard, that has played for Liverpool, and dare I say, I actually think he's actually surpassed Steven Gerrard in terms of, apart from the homegrown aspect. For me, he has surpassed Steven Gerrard in terms of, overall status at Liverpool, in terms of legendary status. For me, in terms of what he's done for the team, for the club. Obviously, he's been a big part of the recent success that his team have had over the last 7 to 8 years. However, I also concur with majority of the footballing world in the sense that I think what Salah did was outrageous, really outrageous conduct, appalling, and I think that he should be ashamed of his behavior, more or less, because it's not so much that it's not even the fact that he shared what should have been a private situation, a private conflict, publicly, instead of handling it internally by going to the coach and knocking on his door and trying to get explanation, and then putting his head down and getting back into the team that way. It is more what he did in terms of his status at the club, because one thing that I wouldn't expect is someone of that stature, someone who's clearly a leader within the dressing room, I believe, at least a leader of the club, of the team, one of the most senior players and a member of the leadership group. I would not expect that kind of reaction, that kind of behavior from him. To go into what he said, essentially, he remarked that he felt as though Liverpool had thrown him under the bus. He said that he believes that there's someone who wants him off the club. He also said that his relationship with Arne Slot had, completely broken down, essentially. And then he added that, he has earned his place in the team based on his performances over the years. That he doesn't have to go every day fighting for his place. And that tells you a lot about his mindset. And it's a really, really bad mistake. Let's dissect it a bit. He said that, he believes he's been scapegoated, having been dropped for the last 3 games before the Inter Milan fixture. He was on the bench against West Ham, didn't feature, came on at halftime in the 1-1 draw with Sunderland, and then obviously he was on the bench, and he would have been an unused substitute against Leeds in the 3-3 draw. I mean, if being left out of a side for 3 games or essentially a week is enough to rattle you to the point where you will go to the press and voice your opinion and your displeasure at a manager's choice or at a coach's choice, then something must be wrong. Is a really a crazy world that we're living in. I mean, Salah's reaction almost paints a picture that he, would have been left out for, majority of the season, for example. I'm one of the opinion that, okay, the whole narrative, the whole discussion about Mohammad Salah being done and his legs having gone, according to certain pundits, I don't necessarily buy into. I think that really and truly the performance of Salah is also a byproduct of the team's condition this year, and the fact the team has been unstable and unable as a result to gather any momentum, any chemistry, any cohesiveness. I think that's basically the reason that we're not seeing the best of Mohamed Salah. I don't think he's fallen off a cliff. I don't think that, for instance, his performances will gradually dwindle over a period of time because he's getting up in age. That is to be expected. But I don't subscribe to this notion that his form has completely gone and he will never ever recapture the brilliance that he demonstrated in previous seasons. That is not the case. But at the same time, in saying that, to suggest that the club has thrown him under the bus suggests that the club, he's being chiefly held responsible for the team's poor results and not given a chance to rectify it. May I remind Mohamed Salah that, from my recollection, apart from the Galatasaray game in the Champions League, he has started almost every single game in the league. Even when he wasn't playing well, even when the team wasn't playing well, he was, in the starting lineup. So to me, the manager has given him the opportunity to play himself back into form. It is clear that the reason in which Salah was taken out of the firing line is because people talk about, Salah doesn't track back, yada yada yada. That's true. He doesn't always track back on every possession anymore. But that was his role last season, and to me, Salah's role in terms of who he's being used in the Liverpool setup hasn't really changed. It's a simple fact that the defense, however, has regressed. The defensive aspect of the team, their performances have diminished. They haven't been as good. They haven't been as consistent. Last season, Salah could have afforded not to track back because Ryan Gravenberch and Ibrahima Konate and Virgil van Dijk were not putting a foot wrong. They were getting everything right and they were cleaning up and plugging all the gaps that Liverpool left behind. This season, though, is being a bit more exploited. I could call a few games, like for instance the Chelsea game, where I think that whole notion about Salah not tracking back really came into focus after the Chelsea game because of how Chelsea scored the winner when Cucurella created a 2v1 on Liverpool's right hand side. But what people fail to forget is that when the ball turned over countless times before that goal went in, Salah had ample opportunities where, talk about trade-offs, where he was free and he was available and he could have supplied a pass or added a finishing touch to perhaps a match-winning situation for Liverpool. However, he squandered those opportunities because he's quite frankly not in form. That's all it is. But the 3 games before he was dropped, Liverpool shipped about 10 goals against, I believe, City, Forest, and then the PSV game. 10 goals in, collectively, which meant that Arne Slot had decided to, bring a bit more stability into the team and try to shore up the defense. Because, as I said on our show, Liverpool are not going to win games as long as they cannot defend. And up until yesterday, and yesterday was only one game, so I wouldn't go as far as to say they've turned a corner. But up until that one game, the reality is that Liverpool were conceding too many goals and teams have begun to really exploit the right hand side. And if he's not playing well, he's not producing numbers in terms of goals and assists, then something had to give and you're going to have to make a change. His reaction for me, like I said before, was poor, wide off the mark. It's only been a week, Mohamed Salah. I'm sure that you will have ample opportunity had you gotten your head down and trained well and stuff like that. And maybe go to the manager and figure out what the ultimate plan was, because Liverpool just gave you a new contract. There's no way that Arne Slot is going to relegate you to the bench in the long term, I believe. I think that was just a way to get the team back on track and get some results, and then gradually, try to rediscover the form that made you guys so brilliant last year and led you to a Premier League title. That's all I think that was. So I think Salah got it wrong there. Next thing he said was that he said he said his relationship with Arne Slot had completely broken down. Now, I'm always of the view that big players, big teams need big managers, and when a manager takes a decision, you know, it always has the capacity, the potential to disrupt or, you know, hurt the feelings of a big player, or no, they're not going to be happy with not playing, more or less. Where for me, where I see it in terms of Salah's outbursts, and the whole, because I would anticipate that Arne Slot would have had a discussion with him. I think where Salah would have been irked, is really down to the fact that, you know, having came off the bench against Sunderland, and I guess you could argue that Liverpool looked a lot brighter, at least initially when he was introduced as a second half substitute. I think what his irritation would have been was that he would have felt that he should have come straight back in the team against Leeds, and when the team was named, I think that's really, you know, that's where lay the problem, because maybe when the team was named for the third game in a row, and he wasn't in the starting lineup, that's where I believe Arne Slot may not have, you know, explained or taken the time to explain to him, to his satisfaction, why he wasn't starting. But, you know, the team had just thrown away 2 leads in the game. During the game, that was not the time. That's not the way to come and express your frustrations. And again, he's wrong for that. Before I get to my last point, which is obviously, do I think there's a way back for Salah after this saga, after this debacle? The last thing that he mentioned that I think we definitely need to touch on, or that I definitely need to touch on, would be the fact that he said that he thinks he almost suggested that he's a star man, he's a main man, and he shouldn't be dropped. He doesn't deserve to be dropped. Essentially, when he said that, you know, he doesn't have to go every day fighting for his place, he's earned it. Now, I think what Salah has earned is that he has definitely earned the 400,000 a week salary that he receives. He's definitely earned his status as a Liverpool legend, as a Premier League legend. But to suggest that you should remain in the side as long as possible just because of your tremendous scoring feats in previous seasons, that's not how football works. That's not how the real world should work. Everything should be earned on merit. And like I said, I believe that Liverpool were not playing well from the start of the season, and it's only recently, it was only in the last week that he was dropped. So to say something like that almost doesn't do the management of Liverpool any favors or justice, because you're almost suggesting that the first sign of, you know, poor form, they've dropped you, when I can argue that they actually, many would argue that they actually left you in the team a bit longer than they should have. That maybe the Arne Slot should have made a change earlier. So that's with him. And more importantly, I think that would have rubbed some of the teammates in the dressing room, I believe, the wrong way. And that's the one thing that Liverpool do not need right now. They do not need any more fraction, any more disharmony. They really need to be pulling together to get themselves back into a position where the season can be salvaged. And for me, the season being salvaged is, for example, getting some form, getting some wins on the board, getting back in the top 4 positions, and perhaps, you know, trying to win a piece of silverware in the second half of the season. And this is my last point on this, which I'm going to come to now. Is there a way back for Mo Salah? Has he played his last game for Liverpool? I would say it's a 50-50. Arne Slot said something after the inter-game that I think was quite telling. When questioned by Clarence Seedorf, he said, when Seedorf obviously asked him about when he tried to reintegrate Salah into the squad, and he said that, well, the first thing is that, you know, players can make mistakes, but does the player think he has made a mistake? And then who should the initiative come from? Should it come from Salah or should it come from Slot? Ordinarily, in an ideal world, you will want both parties to meet in the middle, but I think Slot is right in this respect. I think that the olive branch or the first gesture should come from Mohammad Salah, and that should come in the way of an apology to not only Slot but to the team, to the dressing room, because what he did would have shed an unwanted spotlight on the team in a season that has been quite abysmal so far. But is there a way back? I think there can be. But again, it all depends on Salah. It all depends on what he wants and what he wants to do. Like I said, I don't think that he is. I don't think that he is incapable of rediscovering his best form. I don't think that he's incapable of getting back inside and contributing to hopefully a better second half of the season. But he must humble himself, and he must admit, he must face up to the fact that he made a mistake, a poor error. Yes, maybe he was emotional, maybe he was still frustrated after not getting on the pitch, having already been frustrated about being left out for the third game in a row. But someone of his experience definitely should be aware that there are better ways to handle such situations and voice your concern or your disapproval. So that's all I have to say on that. Please, those of you who watch this video, please share your thoughts in the comments, and as always, please like, share and subscribe to the Dugout Podcast. You can find us at our Instagram handle of the Dugout_podcast, and you can follow me at my own personal handle, Dream9106. Until next time.